Given the small intimate group this time, I'm going to dispense with formalities with your indulgence, and we will just basically get into it. So today's session is our COVID jobs impact webinar number 4 in this last series of the last 4 months. And without further ado, welcome Sharon Bird, the member for Cunningham, and welcome Tanya Brown, the, what do I call you, Deputy Lord Mayor still?
Technically not, just councillor, I think.
Councillor
I've been re-elected to Ward 2, so.
Councillor Brown. And so I will hand over now to Alex Spillett, who will take us through the presentation. Thanks, Alex.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. As you can see on the title page, the data that we have here is up to the middle of November. So it's a month in arrears, but it does tell an interesting picture of certainly a rapidly emerging recovery and a fairly broad-based recovery as well. So that's the good news for the Illawarra. So you can see in this chart the impact on payroll jobs in the Illawarra since March 2020, which was the start of the first lockdown, and each successive dip that has come with each lockdown, and the recovery that we can see from the latest lockdown as well. So last set of statistics, we were just coming out of the bottom of the dip, and now we are moving fairly well up into a recovery where we're within 100 or so jobs of the pre-COVID level of employment. However, we're still below the level of employment seen prior to this latest lockdown. So we've got a way to go yet in terms of recovery. And the recovery that we see is fairly broad and mirrored across all the sub regions within the Illawarra, Dapto, Port Kembla, Kiama, Shellharbour and Wollongong being the SA4 regions, and Kiama and Shellharbour is leading the way in the recovery. What is interesting to note is that certainly accommodation and food is less in the red than it was, and other sectors are recovering well, and certainly in the areas like healthcare and social assistance, professionals, public administration, and the retail trade now joining in the recovery. So we can see that there is certainly a reasonably broad-based recovery underway. And again, this is borne out by a more detailed look at the pluses and minuses in the Illawarra. So the accommodation sector still in the red in terms of job losses from the start of COVID, but less negative than it was. The areas that have historically been adding jobs continue to do so. So we're seeing that recovery pretty well across the board, which is encouraging. Oops, I've gone too far with that one. If we go to have a look at some of the subsectors, I'll have a look at a bit more detail beyond the 19 major industry subsectors. We look into in some more detail areas like food retailing and tertiary education, which were significantly in the red the last time we looked at these numbers, are now in the green. And the areas of food and beverage service and accommodation are less in the red than they were previously. So again, this is borne out not only at a full group level, but also within the subgroups that we see in more detail. You'll remember this chart, and again, to explain it, this looks at whether industry groups are adding or reducing numbers, and whether they're above or below their pre-COVID levels of employment. So where you want to be is where the green oval is in the top right quadrant, and where you don't want to be is in the red bubble in the bottom left-hand quadrant. In early June, we could see that most industries were adding people or above levels of pre-COVID employment. During the latest lockdown, we saw those starting to slide, and you can see that accommodation and food is was well below where it needed to be, and well into that bottom left-hand quadrant where you don't want to be. The latest data indicates that that's changing quite significantly. You can see even accommodation and food has come closer to the line where it was pre-COVID, and is adding jobs again. So that's a positive. The rest of the industries are now moving above the horizontal line and up into the top quadrant, top right-hand quadrant. So there is a fairly broad-based recovery underway within the Illawarra. So that's very, very positive. Also see the jobs impact by age, and this is data for Australia, not specific to the Illawarra, but broadly, younger people who continue to bear the brunt of job shedding. You can see that women between the ages of 25 and 40 are re-entering the workforce faster than men, and those workers 60 plus appear to be remaining in or re-entering the workforce in some capacity. So that's an interesting trend, and one that we've certainly seen with the older cohort throughout the lockdowns. What's not so good news overall is that participation rates, so the number of people actually seeking employment, continue to be quite low. Although for women, it has recovered a little bit in the last month, and we can see that recovery continuing through November. But again, participation rates, people looking for work, is in need of a bit of a kick along, and some confidence in the economy will certainly assist in that regard. As we've seen from recent articles in the media, and even from our own anecdotal knowledge, there are plenty of roles to be filled. It's just encouraging people to do so. The next slide looks at the New South Wales trend by gender, and based on these latest figures, women are more recently re-entering the workforce about 30% faster than their male counterparts. So the jobs that had been shed during lockdown mainly impacted women, or impacted women greater than men. We're now seeing that trend reverse, and women are re-entering the workforce as they no longer have homeschooling and home care duties to take care of. Interestingly, of the payroll impact by gender also shows a positive trend. So the index for men and for women, which was 100 at the start of March 2020, is now back above that pre-COVID level, and shows signs of being sustainably there. If we move now on to business size, this chart just shows the comparison between the Illawarra and New South Wales in terms of business size, and we're nearly a mirror image of New South Wales. So I'm confident in being able to sort of mirror New South Wales numbers for the Illawarra. We have, unfortunately, an above state average number of businesses in badly affected sectors, including accommodation, food, arts and rec, construction, manufacturing, and retail trade. However, we can see that by business size, and again, this is New South Wales data, businesses are bouncing back. Small businesses, small and micro businesses, the turquoise line, bouncing back very strongly, followed by medium-sized businesses and larger organisations following on. Unfortunately, that data is only available to the 16th of October, so we haven't seen the complete playing out of those trends. but I've no doubt that they will continue to be positive over the subsequent month. And second to last, we come to the commuting habits. Lockdown did see a marked reduction in rail and road commuting. The latest data indicates that road usage is approaching pre-lockdown levels. As you can see, it's now back to 10% below the level in February 2020. But rail usage continues to lag. So there's, even with the recent increase through to November, there's still been a 55% reduction in journeys by rail into Sydney. So again, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and that really is to do with people working more days a week from home, or working full-time from home rather than doing the daily commute into the city. So in summary, based on the data in November, the jobs outlook is the most positive we've seen over the last 5 months, with a post-lockdown pre-Christmas recovery underway across most sectors. The number of payroll jobs is increasing, but still not reached the levels seen before the latest lockdown. Healthcare, social assistance, public administration continue to lead the way. Retail is also picking up, as is accommodation. So recovery in badly affected sectors is underway. Accommodation, food, beverage, travel, arts and rec, tertiary education. Women aged 25 to 40 are re-entering the workforce, and that's a very, very positive sign. And commuters are back on the road, in case anybody hadn't noticed. Unfortunately, participation rates remain low, especially for women, and the main impact of the lockdown continues to be seen in younger workers. And that brings us to the end of the presentation, and time for Q&A if anybody has questions.